Welcome to all and happy MSME Day. We are very pleased to launch the 2022 Small Business Champions Initiative today. A link with more information should be available in the chat. Also, as you have just seen, today's event has interpretation available in Spanish, French, and English. As the coordinator of the WTO Informal Working Group on MSMEs, let me thank you for joining us to celebrate this important part of the global economy and to launch the 2022 Small Business Champions Initiative. MSMEs represents the majority of businesses in every economy, and finding ways to support their access to the international economy is one way to support their ability to innovate, to pursue growth, and to increase sustainability. Following from the successful 2022 Small Business Digital Champion Initiative, the WTO Informal Working Group, in partnership with the International Chamber of Commerce and the International Trade Center, are planning to make the Small Business Champions Initiative an annual competition with a different trade-related theme every year. This year's theme is helping small businesses transition to a sustainable economy. Climate change and its impacts are being felt by everyone. When it comes to trade, supply chains have seen disruptions from weather events. Farmers have experienced even more uncertainty about their harvest, and businesses can face closures from climate-related events. MSMEs are both the most vulnerable to these challenges, but also the most innovative with their solutions, which is why they need to act. Decarbonization won't come without change, and small businesses are often the best situated for this. This is why we are launching the competition for MSMEs business support organizations and NGOs on ways to help small businesses transition to a sustainable economy. The call for proposals for the Small Business Champions can be found on the WTO website, and applications can be submitted anytime before 31st July 2022. Winners will be announced at the Building Bridges event in Geneva during the first week of October 2022. And be highlighted by the ICC, ITC, and WTO. We can't wait to see your submissions. Joining us today are WTO Director General Dr. Ngozi Okonjo Iweala with a video message, as well as ICC Secretary General John Denton and ITC Executive Director Pamela Hamilton from the ITC. Both in person. The importance of MSMEs and international trade is well known to each of these speakers, and I'm looking forward to their comments. Let's begin with Dr. Ngozi Okonjo Iweala's statement. It's fine now.
Good afternoon and happy International MSMEs Day to all. I'm sorry I can't join you in person today, but I'm glad I can participate through this video. Micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises employ the vast majority of workers around the world. When MSMEs become more productive and connect to regional and international markets, it makes economies and trade more inclusive. Last year's Digital Champions for Small Business Initiative was a success, with more than 100 applications received and 4 inspiring winners. I'm delighted that the MSMEs Group and its partners, the ICC and ITC, chose to make the initiative annual. The theme for this year's 2022 Small Business Champions Initiative, helping small business transition to a more sustainable economy, could not be more timely. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change noted earlier this year that without immediate and deep emissions cuts across all sectors, limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees centigrade will be beyond reach, with all the devastating consequences this would have on our economies, our lives, and those of our children. Businesses of all sizes must be part of the action required to mitigate the impact of climate change. According to a study released today by the WTO Secretariat, using Meta's Global State of Small Business Survey, about half of small businesses surveyed are worried about the impact of climate change on their business. Women entrepreneurs who have less access to training, financing, and informative tools to mitigate climate-related risks are even more concerned. Most small businesses surveyed are willing to change their business practices to reduce emissions, but face key barriers in the shape of operating costs and lack of knowledge of decarbonization practices. Small businesses clearly need help to transition to more sustainable practices. This is what this initiative is about. I encourage private companies, industry associations, chambers of commerce, and NGOs wherever they are to become small business champions and to submit proposals to help MSMEs become more sustainable. Helping small businesses transition to a more sustainable economy is a win-win-win scenario. Good for business, good for the economy overall, and good for the environment. I thank Sustainable Finance Geneva for their support in sponsoring the initiative this year. Thank you and good luck.
Thoughtful remarks from the Director General. Now, John, please let me turn the floor to you. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Cancela. I've just had the most amazing 2 weeks working out of Latin America. And I can tell you, the power of SMEs and MSMEs is very visible. But one of the challenges, as you know, is that only 1% of SMEs actually export out of Latin America. So one of our jobs is to help champion that as an opportunity, because just think of the additional value that more SMEs exporting will be able to deliver. That's something we're very focused on. And I had the pleasure of meeting with the ministers of finance in Mexico, in Colombia, Buenos Aires, and Santiago, and it's exactly what we were discussing. And of course, it's always great to hear Director Ngozi, and a big shout out to her for actually shepherding through, as we would say in Australia, the outcome at MC12. Not perfect, but my dear, what an outcome compared to what was confronting us, the dead end that it appeared we were confronting. So it's a very good outcome indeed. And it's very good to see the MSME Informal Working Group, which is doing incredibly important work for the global business community, being celebrated today. And also a big shout out to Dorothy and to all of those who joined us today on MSME or MSME Day. I'm particularly thrilled to launch, alongside the WTO and ITC, the latest iteration of the ICC Small Business Champions Initiative. This competition will help highlight and celebrate creative and impactful projects that put small business at the center of the green transition. ICC, we are the representative of more than 45 million businesses now in more than 130 countries, many of which are actually present today on the call. And ICC is incredibly grateful to be able to support this important initiative, because we want to put the spotlight on the global MSME community. We, as the voice of the real economy, want this focused on. I'm also very grateful because this is a very important moment for the small business community. We know how battered you've been by COVID-19, and also how MSMEs have had to grapple with particularly challenging and volatile business environment, which continues, grappling with inflationary pressure, grappling with rising interest rate, grappling with unreliable supply chains, and a host of other issues that are really challenging your ability to thrive and to deliver for the communities that depend on you. The key message for MSMEs in the current crisis is always about resilience. But resilience is never enough. And because of the sheer weight of MSMEs in the global economy, we need to make sure that small businesses can support our collective commitments towards a more sustainable future, as Ngozi was just saying. In short, we cannot accomplish a meaningful green transition and achieve net zero targets without working hand in hand with MSMEs globally. There's clearly a need for urgent action, but there's also a growing commitment from MSMEs of all sizes, in all regions, and in all sectors to deliver on the green transition. Small businesses far and wide are overwhelmingly eager from all the research we've done and from all the engagement we have with our network, they tell us they're eager to take action and to make a difference. Crucially, small businesses often understand that true resilience and sustainability are two sides of the same coin. They understand that their own green transition can help ensure long-term success for the planet. But what's also quite clear is that the green transition of MSMEs is not always straightforward. We know from our experience that up to 90% of small businesses feel that they're still facing barriers to taking action on climate. And so with governments and large businesses increasingly exploring measures to reduce their environmental footprints, there's a real risk that MSMEs do not have the foresight or the capital to adapt their business practices. And the challenge is if they do not, they may ultimately be shut out of future opportunities. This is precisely why we at the ICC are taking forceful action across our full range of activities to support MSMEs in this challenging but critical, important transition, including creating our own tools to support this. The famous ICC SME 360X, for example, which you should have a look at our website to get a handle on how that operates. So a few months ago, we also launched the ICC Small Business Champions Network, an informal advisory group of MSME leaders to channel views from the small business community during these business panel discussions. You'll hear from Pinaman Owusu and of course my dear friend Victor Dossowitz, who's our chair, two valued members of the network who will also highlight some of the challenges, but also some of the opportunities associated with the green transition of MSMEs. Indeed, helping MSMEs go green is not just about addressing challenges, it's also about enabling them to seize new opportunities. And the green economy is creating enormous opportunities for businesses of all sizes that are willing and are capable of putting sustainability at the heart of their business model. But delivering fully on the promises of a more sustainable future for the small business community requires a couple of things. First, sustained multi-stakeholder engagement to create the environment we need to make this possible. And two, the continued development of innovative business solutions like the ICC SME 360X that can help MSMEs navigate their green transition. ICC and our extraordinary global network, working closely with international and regional organizations, will continue to take a leading role in supporting MSMEs in both these areas. The stakes are high, my friends, as are expectations, but with sustained collaboration, we'll get there in the end. I want to thank the WTO and the ITC once again for your continued support and your partnership on this all-important topic. And personally, I want to thank you, Ambassador Cancela, for your championship of this very important area. Thank you again for allowing me to participate in this discussion.
Thank you very much, John, for your kind words and your very encouraging remarks and your continued support for the small business champions. Thanks, John. Last but not least, let me give the floor to a very good friend of the MSMEs from some time ago, that is Dorothy Tembo from ITC. So Dorothy, it's a pleasure to see you again, and the floor is yours.
Cancela, always a pleasure to see you, but more importantly, to also engage with you in what I call or see as very important conversations. Let me start by apologizing for the absence of my executive director, who would have loved to join us this afternoon, but unfortunately, she was unable to make it today. I am very pleased to be joining you all today for launching this year's edition of the Small Business Champions. I'm especially happy to be speaking alongside WTO DG and indeed John ICC SG, both of whom have been working tirelessly to promote the cause of small business. Today is a special day. We are celebrating the 5th anniversary of the United Nations International Day that is dedicated to micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. MSMEs Day, as we often refer to it. At ITC, we're very pleased to have been one of the founding proponents of this UN Day. Very often, when we talk about business, what comes to mind are big companies. Yet, small businesses are at the heart of our economies. As we have already heard, They account for over 70% of businesses and more than 50% of jobs around the world. This year, the challenges that small businesses face are not only acute, but they are also growing. COVID, conflict, and climate have joined together to disrupt not just businesses, but also our daily lives. Every day, we hear more floods, droughts, and hurricanes. We have never seen this confluence of circumstances, and I will admit, sometimes it's hard to stay positive. Sometimes it's hard to see that light that gives us hope for the future. But as John said earlier on, we have to remember, from crisis springs creativity and the chance to change. Moving to a greener and more sustainable economy is not just a good cause to fight for. It is a great business opportunity, especially for small businesses in developing countries, whom we know are especially unprepared to harness this opportunity. I strongly believe that by bringing more small businesses into the global green economy, we help them grow, trade, and become resilient. We can help them survive and thrive for the next economic shocks. MSMEs must be at the center of any economic recovery. They are the backbone of societies everywhere. They are also the most vulnerable to the triple threat that we face today. When you make small businesses more resilient, especially those in the smallest and least developed countries, you build a world where trade builds inclusive, sustainable, and prosperous economies. We at the International Trade Center are committed to supporting green initiatives. We are creating a global movement for trade that is truly inclusive and sustainable. So, in closing, I am particularly excited that ITC is a part of this joint effort. I look forward to learning about the inspiring, innovative ideas that we'll put forward in this competition. I hope that this work and all our wider efforts as international organizations will help MSMEs make the green transition on their own terms. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dorothy, for those inspiring introductory remarks. And thank you to you both for joining us for this second year of the Small Business Champions. Thank you very much. Let us now turn to the second part of today's lunch, our panel of business representatives. A big thank you to the ICC for bringing in this distinguished panel together, which includes Sandrine Salerno from Sustainable Finance Geneva, Erik Churchill from UPS, Elisa Moscolin from SAGE, Pinaman Owusu from ADJOAA, and Victor Dosorets from Mantra Beauty. Let me now turn to Charlie Gordon from the ICC, who will moderate the panel. Charlie, over to you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Cancela, and greetings all from Paris. So I'm Charlie Gordon. I'm Global Policy Lead at the International Chamber of Commerce, and I'm really delighted to open the second part of this webinar, which brings together, as Ambassador was just saying, a really stellar group of speakers to further explore the role of MSMEs in the green transition and understand how we can collectively empower MSMEs to transition to a more sustainable economy. So we chose to further discuss this topic today for a few reasons. Number one, it's quite clear that urgent and forceful environmental action is necessary to mitigate some of the worst effects of the climate and environmental crisis. And this is leading to more and more ambitious and necessary sustainability goals, of course, but also more and more governments are ramping up regulation to both encourage action and also increasingly to enforce action. And while it's quite clear that larger corporates are indeed taking increasingly forceful action, the MSME community as a whole can and should take a more proactive role in this space. First, because MSMEs present a major opportunity to advance environmental objectives through a systematic uptake and implementation of sustainable business practices. And second, because this can create significant business opportunities for MSMEs, and the green transition can and should be a vector for innovation, for impact, and for sustainable growth throughout. But we also chose to focus on this topic because in order to really unleash the full potential of MSMEs, we need sustained multi-stakeholder action to really create that enabling environment that can help foster meaningful change and help MSMEs achieve their green transition. And so to further discuss, I'm really delighted to be joined by Sandrine Salerno, who's the former mayor of Geneva and current director of Sustainable Finance Geneva, which is a non-profit organization dedicated to promoting sustainable finance. I'm also joined by Erik Churchill, Vice President Public Affairs at UPS, the global shipping and supply chain management company, of course. By Elisa Moscolin, who's Executive Vice President Sustainability at Sage, which is a UK-based enterprise software company that provides accounting, finance, and payroll software to many MSMEs. And I'm also joined by Pinaman Owusu, founder and CEO of ADJOAA, an online marketplace for sustainable fashion and lifestyle brands by African designers. And finally, by Victor Doseritz, who's CEO of Mantra Beauty, which is an Argentina-based SME that specializes in cosmetics and skincare. So a very warm welcome to all of you, and very many thanks again for agreeing to share some of your time with us and some of your insights. Now, to start this panel, I thought we could perhaps start by discussing some of the barriers, some of the obstacles that MSMEs typically face in the context of the green transition. I think we all agree that MSMEs need to take action, but this can prove quite challenging at times for many smaller organizations. And so perhaps I can first start with Pinaman and Victor, who are both our SME leaders here today. And if I can start with you, Pinaman, what are some of the recurring challenges you've experienced or identified when implementing sustainable business practices, both within your organization, but also perhaps with your marketplace participants?
Okay, thank you very much. I think a lot of the opportunities were highlighted by the earlier speakers. I think in my space, being in the fashion industry, we all know that fashion is one of the biggest polluters of the environment. And we work with small and sustainable brands from the African continent. They obviously see the value in sustainability. Most of the ones that we work with are aware of their production practices and being ethical in terms of production practices, sourcing materials, and all of that. I think one of the main challenges that I've come across in my conversation with a lot of our brands is what to prioritize beyond economic sustainability, or for most of them coming from an emerging market where we have indigenous traditional manufacturing practices. An aspect of sustainability that never gets touched on is cultural sustainability, how we need to preserve these kind of things. And I think for our cohort of workers or artisans or that we work with, I think the difficulty is being able to tell the story the way the West is able to communicate that value of what they're doing sustainable, because their consumers are already demanding sustainability, they're aware of it, whether through the design practices are being sustainable with their made to order or whatever model that they choose to take on, but they don't have the ability to know what to prioritize in terms of measurement, data, what should they be collecting to be able to communicate to stakeholders that are interested, be it consumers or even for agencies that they might be partnering with. I think those are some of the cool things that would be really great. And I suppose also the certification element, especially in the fashion industry. These small businesses are using dead stock, which would have naturally end up in landfills, causing another havoc to the environment. But yet there is no way to prove to the end consumer unless they're certified by a big organization. And certification is very expensive for a small brand that might have 3 or 4 people or even 10 people, and you need to recertify every time. So a lot of them I have taken the position of I'm sustainable by design. I'll find ways to communicate with my audience. I would try sustainable packaging and keep my business practices sustainable because some of the cost involved is arduous. Some of the reporting requirement is quite challenging. I think those are the key issues that I tend to come across, and also looking at, I think sustainable finance team is already here. What is the value of a small brand, that chooses to take on this massive challenge of trying to have a really transparent and sustainable practice versus a big brand that is not doing any of these things? How does the value accrue to them? I think it needs to be tangible for them to know that there is real value beyond the environmental practices of tree planting to offset their carbon footprints, looking for greener supply chain options to send products to their consumers. So a lot are trying to take chip at each of the sustainable practices, but not in its wholest form. And I think the value that organization that like the ICC brings is, being able to provide some starting point as to where to start from. The SDGs, if that's what you're focusing on in your practices as sustainability, how do you measure that impact? How do you show this to your end consumers?
Is your experience similar, Victor? What are some of the challenges you've identified?
Well, thank you. Good to see everybody, and thank you for the invitation. I would say that in the past, we as SME, we have been underserved by sustainability and climate action initiative. But we understand it is time for SMEs to take action and to go for an active role. It's not a need. It's not an option. No matter the size of company, it's our opportunity. This is what we have to do. In our consideration, by all means, our commitment is that we cannot think on profitable business if they are not sustainable. But it's not only what we think as an SME. It is worth commenting that there are decisions that today not only depend on what company we want to do or what we want to communicate, as Pinaman said. The environment, in our case, customers have more and more importance when they decide to choose suppliers and product according to the commitment to sustainability and climate change. In our case, we have about 45% of our customers who are between 18 and 35 years old. They have a big conscience about what we are talking about. These young customers have different purchase attitudes. We must understand them and satisfy them. As a significant portion of them, when choosing the product, they take into consideration not only the price or the feature, but also company values. And so we work on that. At this value, we can give small steps and small actions in our. Pinaman was also mentioned the packaging issue. Maybe later I can explain, but we did a lot of decision in terms of packaging. We reduced the size of our packaging. We stopped to work with alkaline batteries devices, for example, and we promote charging devices in not big demands hours. These are just small examples. Also, as we are on e-commerce, we decided to use since a long time ago biodegradable bags. So there are different things that we are convinced that we can do in order to help and to communicate and to get these important things and value that consumers understand and require from us these days.
Yes, I think you've raised two very important points here. It's sort of two challenges I think that can sort of drive this conversation forward. I think, Pinaman, you highlighted the fact that it's quite challenging for SMEs to prioritize action and to identify a starting point. And I think that's something we see over and over again in our engagement with some small businesses. I think, Victor, your point around having to adapt to new customer demands and customer requirements is also something that MSMEs are increasingly taking on board and eventually sort of nudging them to take action. And I'd like to turn to Elisa and Erik. Obviously, Sage and UPS are much larger organizations, but you do work very, very closely with fairly different and diverse MSMEs on a daily basis. Can you tell us what are some of your customers' attitudes towards environmental sustainability, and has this attitude perhaps evolved over time? Do you want to go first, Elisa?
Yes, sure. I fully agree with everything that's been said, and that has been also our experience. I think, John, you mentioned at the opening that 90% of small, medium businesses find barriers to actually embracing sustainability. And in a research we've done, that is also that is an interesting other statistic that says 80% of them say environmental sustainability is very important. So it's very interesting. You've got 80% that says this is incredibly important, and 90% that says there's lots of barriers for us to actually take action. And we at Sage really recognize that and would like to be to remove those barriers. We really want to knock down those barriers for SMBs to be able to truly embrace and embark in this sustainability journey. And we see this through three lenses. We think that there are three fronts we need to work on as a big organization, because of course Sage is a FTSE 100, but we've got the spirit of small, medium businesses. That's the customers we serve. So we see three tasks for us. One is around walking the talk. So we've made a commitment around becoming net zero by 2040, halving our emissions by 2030, and we we're just submitting now our science-based target, so it's going through verification. So we're committing to do that in a very robust and thorough way. And I think the reason why that is very important is we need to walk the talk. And we always say we can't support SMBs, small medium businesses, if we haven't gone through the same pain ourselves. And we are actually learning a lot, and a lot of these lessons I think will help us to be able to support small medium businesses in their own journey. So that's first, walk the talk. And there is a point for us around also credibility, authenticity, right? The second, which is very, very important, is removing those barriers. And the reality is I don't think there is a silver bullet. And in the research and insights that we're doing, we're finding out that the problem is complex, but we are convinced that using technology, using what we know how to do best at Sage, and using our voice as well, we can remove those barriers. So we've started. We're providing some information to small, medium businesses through our website. Those are resources that are free to access for all small, medium businesses on how they can become more sustainable. And this is because what we are hearing over and over again is what the colleagues have just highlighted. SMBs tell us very loud and clear, we want this, but we don't have the time. We cannot hire an Elisa, an Erik. We can't hire the sustainability experts. So please, Sage, please, and I'm sure they're looking also at yourselves, at the World Trade Organization and ICC. Be our experts, guide us, help us to make this simple. So that's the second basket for us, is how can we make this simple? What role can we play as an organization to simplify it, either through technology or through our knowledge? And then the third and last space is advocacy. And I think the reason why that is important is goes back to the point of simplification and what Pinaman, you just highlighted, what data to collect, when to collect and when to report. We need to make sure, and this is working with government policymakers, that we don't create an excessive burden for SMBs when it comes to reporting standards. And I am, and we are at Sage, absolutely supportive on driving more transparency. I was just reading throughout the weekend the news on the corporate directive at the EU being approved. We are very enthusiastic about also the progress that ISSB is making. We just need to be very careful that as we create a requirement for small, medium businesses to report, that is made simple. And we at Sage, we are really thinking carefully, how can we support policymakers in making the right decision to drive transparency and make sure that those information do help better market capital allocation, but also do not hinder and create a burden for SMB. So those are the three: walk the talk, support and unlock, knock down barriers with technology and all the means that we can use, and third, advocacy and making sure informing policymakers and governments. So those are the three routes that we see into helping small, medium businesses to thrive. Because I would close by saying I really agree in everything everyone said. This is not just the right thing to do, it's also the smart business thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Erik, do you agree? What is your experience with UPS?
Absolutely. I mean, I think fully agree with what Elisa just mentioned. I mean, at UPS, similar to Sage, our customer base is over 90% SMEs. So this is a really critical segment for our business. We do a lot of surveys of our customers, and we did a couple this year focusing on sustainability all around the world. And the results echo exactly what Pinaman and Victor and Elisa said, which is that there is absolutely no doubt that SMEs are committed to sustainability. And I think the challenge is, why does that not always get put into action? I think we see a couple things. One of them is on price. There are simply, so you have to bifurcate the MSME market into a few different segments. And at the higher medium-sized business end, there's a commitment and there's action being taken, and they're actually pushing us forward. But as we get lower, and especially as we get into micro businesses, that becomes harder and harder. Just the price elasticity for those businesses, the margins that they're making, make every single decision that much more important. So that means we need to bring down the price of doing things sustainably. And that's true across the board. That's true in the United States. It's true in developing countries. The other side, and Elisa spoke about this eloquently, but is on the regulatory burden. And I think it's just having a seat at the table. Pinaman mentioned that sustainability means different things in different places, and I think that's that kind of attitude. Sustainability means different things to different size businesses, and their ability to get to the place where we all want to be, which is a lower carbon future, depends on us recognizing that MSMEs have a different path in order to get there, and we need to bring them along in perhaps different ways than we do with Fortune 500 companies. And I think that's really the challenge, is figuring that out. I think there are some solutions that are in train, but making sure that MSMEs have a seat at the table when those regulations are being made, I think is absolutely critical in order for that knowledge to be passed down across the networks. I'll stop there.
Thanks, Erik. Yes, a number of really important points there. I think it's critical that, as Elisa, you mentioned, that issue around leading by example. I think that's critical from some of the larger companies. And then, if I understand correctly, a key point you highlighted is around, we both highlighted really, is around helping SMEs manage that complexity. And that goes back to Pinaman's point around prioritizing action and understanding where to start. It's a fairly daunting environment. There's a lot of information, and I think very often we see that there's a lot of information, but maybe not enough orientation. And I think that's perhaps something that they have to bear in mind. We're also very fortunate to have a former mayor on this panel. Sandrine, you first became mayor of Geneva in 2010, and again in 2019. What's the state of play within the MSME community in Geneva when it comes to the implementation of sustainable business practices? Has that changed over these past few years?
Well, I think it's not only the situation in Geneva, but in Switzerland and in many countries. It is at that stage difficult for big companies to have a strategy that is about transition. So if it's difficult for big companies, it is more difficult for MSMEs because they were totally absent of all the discussion and the regulation and that we have since Les Accords de Paris 2015. So now we're starting to think about what would be the journey for MSMEs. And of course, as Elisa, but like everyone said, we cannot ask the same thing to a big company that we will ask for MSMEs. Otherwise, it will not be possible. So I would say that here in Geneva, but also in Switzerland, the discussion are just starting about what would be the regulation, what would be the framework, what kind of metrics, data, and so on. And it has to be something that is pertinent, of course, that it has sense, but it cannot be, as Elisa said, a burden. Otherwise, you can just stop doing your job and just fulfill compliance, but you don't have the team, you don't have the time, you don't have the structure for. So I would say that it is on the start of the journey. It will take time, even if we have a big challenge to in front of us, and we don't have that much time. But we need to find something that is adequate for clients, politics, but also for the MSMEs. And we'll see maybe in 1 or 2 years how the market, but also the regulator. In Switzerland, we don't have a lot of regulation about sustainability. We have our own path, which is very linked to EU, but still different. So we will see also talking about transition, how the financial market and financial industry will adapt to the need of transition and the need of transition in the perspective of MSMEs.
Yeah, so we're at the fairly early stages, I suppose, and we have to work together to build that enabling environment, I suppose, that can help MSMEs in their journey. And I think that's actually a good segue to the next point I think we should perhaps address, which is really around how we can collectively alleviate some of the challenges that we mentioned and help SMEs towards that successful transformation. So if I come back to you, Pinaman, what are some of the drivers, some of the key levers that can compel small businesses to engage more proactively and forcefully in the green transition? I mean, is it market incentive? Is it the potential regulatory burden down the road? What can drive MSME action, I suppose?
I think, as most of you have already touched on, is multifactorial. You know, for some of us, you know, a lot of it is being driven by our consumers, those of us in the consumer space. So what the consumers are asking for and the value that they see in sustainability and their willingness to pay for it is driving a lot of our decision. But that's also recognizing that it comes at a cost. So how do we provide sustainable products or options to consumers at an accessible price point, I think, which Erik mentioned. So those are some of the things. For us, purchasing decision, consumer purchasing power is this very strong lever that we can overlook. But similarly, also recognizing that that lever, it's also informed by price. So they're willing to pay, but it also needs to be accessible because the Gen Z millennials are looking to explore other options of sustainability, especially for those of us in the fashion space. It doesn't have to be a new garment. It can be an upcycled, recycled, rental option. So those are some of the things that I know. What we're doing specifically to make it more digestible is that recognizing the quick wins and going, what can we do in terms of transitioning our consumers as a marketplace, knowing that we work with the really lower end, which is the micro level SMEs. So, you know, we support them with packaging to say, okay, these are compostable packaging. We would provide as a platform to make that journey to transitioning to sustainability a little bit more easier. These are some of the KYC information that you should be collecting about your own business practices and seeing how we can help you in the medium term to map that and also to be able to tell your story directly to your consumers, independent of, supposed in our space, the certification processes. One of the things that we're doing also as a platform to support our vendors is the data that we've collected working with B Corp and seeing how we can become B Corp certified as a platform on behalf of all our vendors. So that means that any obligations that we have in fulfilling that sustainable transition kind of filters down to the data that we collect and also the accountability that we set for our vendors. That is another practical way that we're trying to leverage to be able to drive this whole thing. Offsetting our carbon footprint for us as a marketplace, it's quite difficult. We can't compete with the big brands. We can't compete with the big organizations that are in this space. So we've taken very practical steps like identifying local organizations that we partner with to do tree planting to offset our carbon footprint. So we have to be very creative, take the policies and map it in a way that it's applicable to us and our size as a small business and how we can also be a part of that transition without being left behind. But in the greater sense, we also look at ESG, you know, what is our board looking like as a company? What is the gender split, you know, in our board? What kind of expertise is sitting here and how are we prioritizing, given that based on our size, for us, we see the lever that we can leverage at the moment is the social aspect. So the job creation, the addressing unemployment, that is the lever that we are prioritizing the ESG space. And also looking at the sustainable SDGs and practically setting that in our business practice and going, how do we translate this into practice in how we operationalize our business abilities? Those are some of the things that we are doing as a marketplace with our consumer. And it's very early in the stage, and we recognize that it's a huge task. It's quite complex, and the level of resourcing that might be required, we don't have it all. So one of the practical ways is also communicating our efforts directly to our consumers to say, we don't know it all, we're going to make some mistakes, and you have to walk alongside us, but you're also holding us accountable so that we hold our end of the bargain. As Elisa said, it's not just talking, but actually walking, you know, taking that practical steps towards achieving that green transition.
Yeah, that collaborative element that you just highlighted is absolutely key, I think. And Victor, you've also taken action to green your business.
Yeah.
What are some of the motivating factors underneath that? You mentioned sort of aligning with some of your customer requirements. Is that the only element that drove you to those initiatives?
No, this is something important, and as Pinaman said, this is a strong power from the consumers. So if we want to continue the business, and we have to understand and to work on that direction. As Erik mentioned about the collective actions that we have to take, and I fully agree. And talking about the price down for sustainability, let me give you my optimistic view. As I mentioned, for example, we changed our packaging. We reduced our devices box, and this is we cooperate. This is a concrete action, but also this is price reduction. We eliminated, for example, the user's manuals because of many reasons, especially in terms of sustainability. And this is something that there is a reducing the cost, and the consumers understand that we are going in the direction and to work on it's in the process. But I would like also to say that there is an importance of the public and private articulation and organization such as ICC or the WTO that bring together the efforts of multiple actors to assist us in the green transition. I also agree with Elisa that SMEs compared to large company, we have more resources, knowledge, human resources, and capital. It is very difficult for SMEs to reach target acting individually. So that's the real value of this collective action and this type of events within the framework of organization that can offer guidelines, tools, and exchange experiences like the small ones that Pinaman and me wanted to share with you. And also in this case, the Small Business Champion Initiative is an example for how more SMEs can be encouraged and made aware to be part of this wave and not to be left behind the wave.
Thank you, Victor. Erik, Elisa, I think you gave us an overview of some of the type of support you bring to the MSME community. But perhaps, do you want to give us some concrete examples of campaigns that you're running? I know UPS has launched the Green Exporter program, and then maybe Elisa, you can mention some key points from the Think Small First report.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think I will talk about the Green Exporters program, but let me just say that first of all, I mean, some of this, the lowest hanging fruit is some of the basic offerings that we offer almost all of our customers: carbon neutral shipping, sustainable packaging solutions, things like that, that don't require necessarily any investment in corporate strategy or corporate thinking from an MSME. But they can just purchase whenever they're doing their shipping options. And UPS isn't alone in that, certainly, but those are important. I mean, just for large businesses to have sustainability as part of their service offering is important. That said, we knew that that wasn't enough, and which is why we launched the Green Exporters program, which aims to build capacity within small businesses. So it looks at deeper questions that, frankly, usually if it were what we call an enterprise customer, a large business, we would charge many thousands of dollars for. We try to bring those principles to MSMEs. How do you green your supply chain? What does it look like to organize your warehouse in a way that is more efficient? A lot of the things that companies need to do, that MSMEs need to do in order to become sustainable, are not about fundamentally changing their practices. It's about making their practices more efficient and more in line with best practice. And just conveying some of those, I think, is one of the most important steps. I mean, I would say one step further than that, and we're really proud of our collaboration with ICC on this, and John mentioned this up at the top, but solutions like SME 360X, which is a certification tool for small businesses, are essential. How does a business that makes this investment prove its bona fides in this space? And those kinds of certifications are really essential. Pinaman mentioned this as well. We've made these steps, we've made these commitments, and it means this. And that's how you create those kind of supplier relationships. That's how you can integrate into global value chains more easily. I think that's really the next wave for MSMEs, is making sure that they can really demonstrate that they are walking the talk, as Elisa mentioned.
With 2 minutes to go, I'm afraid I won't make justice to the Think Small First report that we've done with the ICC and the ACA. So what I maybe do just a few reflection. I fully agree with everything that has been said, and I think what leads me to think is we cannot succeed in isolation. And I'm really thrilled that today we have a representation from the small, medium businesses, from ICC, from the World Trade Organization, and from big businesses, because I think that this challenge, climate change challenge, does take a concerted effort across all these stakeholders if we want to really make a difference. And I think that, Victor, you mentioned, I think small, medium businesses have been historically underserved in the sustainability arena. And it's one of the reasons why, to be honest, I joined SAGE not too long ago, because SAGE really wants to be the voice of small, medium businesses and truly support their transition. I think that we together today, and this initiative is really a great opportunity for us to really give a voice to small, medium businesses, but also together find the solutions, remove those barriers, remove the friction, knock down those barriers for SMBs to succeed. And I'm really encouraged by, I mean, and inspired by Pinaman and Victor when I hear you talking. And I think what we also like to do at SAGE is bringing customers like yourself, small, medium businesses like yourself at the forefront to share your experiences and together collectively to find the solutions. As I said before, there isn't a silver bullet, but I am convinced that together through these initiatives, through these conversations, we can truly change the future.
Thanks so much, Lisa. There's another very important point I wanted to address. Unfortunately, we're quickly, well, we have run out of time, but that's access to finance. Now, I think as most of you know, we'll be announcing the winners of the Small Business Champions Initiative at Building Bridges. So maybe I can give the last word to Sandrine to tell us a bit more about the event and why MSMEs should pay attention to sustainable and impact finance.
I think everyone should, because the world would be sustainable or not, and if not, it's going to be difficult for everyone. Maybe a few words on Building Bridges, the next edition. It will take place, as it was said before, beginning of October, from the 3rd to the 6th of October in Geneva. But it's also something that you would be able to follow, because the whole event and all events actually will be live streamed. So maybe go, I will put it on the chat, but you should go on our website, the www.buildingbridges.org. We will launch the 22 edition at the end of this week, and you will have all the information about the summit that is the beginning of Building Bridges. Thank you, Evelyn. And after the summit that will start on Monday, the 3rd of October, and then Tuesday morning, we will have what we call the week. And the week is a crowdsourced event. This year we will have 65 events, all around the sustainability in its various aspects. So I surely encourage everyone to come if in Geneva or not too far, and if not possible to come, then to follow it on the link that was given before.
Thank you so much, Sandrine. And I'm going to very quickly thank once again our panelists today for your time and insights. I think this is the beginning of a discussion. Perhaps we can continue this at Building Bridges in a few months' time. But thanks so much, and back to you, Ambassador Cancela. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much to everyone. And well, it's difficult to imagine a better way to celebrate Miss Day than trying precisely to figure out how to remove the barriers to become more sustainable for micro, small, and medium businesses. So once again, happy Miss Day to all of you.